Hello, this is Cindy again from Cindy's Library, and believe it or not, I have already gotten done the minimum I was planning to do for Nonfiction November, and that was read Jane and Dorothy by Marian Veevers. So this was a very interesting book I found. I know something about Jane Austen. I did not know so much about Dorothy Wordsworth, but interestingly enough, they had a lot in common. They were born 4 years apart, Dorothy born first, and then Jane was born 4 years after. They basically came from about the same social strata of English society. And they were both, ended up both never marrying. And so they both faced the situation of trying to figure out how to manage their life, how to have a life in a society where their options were extremely limited. You've got marriage, you could possibly be a governess or a teacher at a school. So that was a possible option too. And then there was rely on your relatives, especially brothers, to provide for you, which is what both of these women ended up doing. They're both fairly fortunate in their brothers, so there is that. They also were fairly literary, but they both had very different responses to exactly how they are going to manage their situations. It's very interesting. Jane Austen was extremely conventional, and so when she wanted to express herself, she found a very conventional way of doing that in her novels. She is not the first female writer or even novelist. She was preceded before by figures like Frances Burney, and so that was something fairly acceptable that she could do. Now, Dorothy Wordsworth, she apparently wrote a fair amount, letters, her journals, especially when they were traveling, so fairly interesting in that way. And at one point she even tried to rewrite and get some descriptions of a journey through Scotland written up, although sadly that never happened. But she, in many ways, was the driving force, at least in his early years as a poet, behind the famous poet and eventually Poet Laureate of England, William Wordsworth. Dorothy basically ended up devoting her life to her brother. She inspired him to be a poet. You can even see some similarities, not just of topics, because they did go to a lot of the same places and things like that, but in wording between what's written in her journals and some of William's poetry, especially in the early years. She was also a friend of Coleridge and was a part of what they called the Great Concern, which in many ways developed the rules of Romanticism and the Romantic poets. And yet she was never published in her lifetime, instead devoting herself to her brother. So it's an interesting take on two different women. subtitle of this book is The True Tale of Sense and Sensibility. You have Jane Austen, very conventional. After her first love, especially, she seemed to become much more sensible. And she had a way of looking at people for who they were. And granted, their potential too, but she didn't have any pie-in-the-sky dreams about them. Unlike Dorothy, who was something of a rebel in her younger years, insisted on expressing herself, and even ran away with her brother to have her own life. But it's interesting that as time goes on, well, it's just like Marian and Eleanor in Sense and Sensibility. Jane Austen never stopped being sensible, but she came to recognize and appreciate sensibility more. And as for Dorothy, she never stopped expressing her feelings, but she did become more sensible in how fully she would express them, shall we say. She might say she was mad, but why she was mad would be a different matter. She might not go into all of that apparently. So, yeah, very interesting take on two different women who in some ways were similar from pretty much the same time period, but in some ways were very different. Sadly, Jane Austen died young, of course. And sadly for Dorothy, she ended up being quite ill in her final years of a very long life. That was complicated by her brother and his wife and Coleridge. So, very interesting. I found it quite a page turner personally. So, as far as writing style and everything, I found it quite easy to follow and quite engaging. So, if you want a bit of a different take on Jane Austen, this might be the book for you, comparing her to Dorothy Wordsworth. So that is what I have to say about this book. Definitely recommend it for Jane Austen fans. And interesting how they both managed to find ways of having their own lives in spite of the restrictions on women at the time. So I think that's all I have to say about this book. So this is Cindy's Library. Thank you for visiting. If you'd like to write a comment below and let me know what you think, I'd love to hear about it if you've read this book. And till next time, hope you stay safe and happy reading.